Welcome to the channel, my friends. On today's video we are going to be replacing the alternator on this Ram 2500. This is a 6.7 Cummins. Not only are we just replacing, we are also just going to upgrade it to the high output 180 amp alternator. Obviously my alternator went bad, it's no longer charging. That's my reason for replacing, and like I said, we might as well go the high output since I am running a plow and some other lights and stuff like that. That helps. So the first thing first, we'll get both of the batteries disconnected and we'll get the airbox out of the way since our alternator sits right behind it here. We have both of the batteries disconnected. I actually pulled this one out. Really not necessary. I wanted to clean things out in here and test everything and test the battery. With the batteries disconnected and the airbox completely removed. Now, if you have a factory box, obviously I have an S&B, but it doesn't matter. They really just lift right out of the way. There's a little pin here that goes through that grommet, and once you disconnect it off the turbo there, you should be able to remove that whole air filter box out of the way. Now that that's out of the way, you can see the alternator is right here. There's two bolts holding it, one up top here and one at the bottom. Other than that, the first thing we need to do is remove the belt off of the alternator. Tensioner is right next to it. So both of the connections will have to be removed on the back of the alternator. This battery cable back here, and there's a connector right next to it. They'll have to be unplugged. First thing we need to do is remove the belt from the alternator. We don't need to remove the whole belt, just off the pulley on the alternator. Now, if you are replacing the belt at this time, you can do that. Not a bad idea to replace the belt and the tensioner. I've already done that before, not too long ago. I will link that video here if you need help putting the belt on and off. That intake or 1/2 inch, either you can do a breaker bar from the bottom or a ratchet. I'm going to be using this tool here, the belt tool. I have a universal one here. This will hook up to that. So I have a belt tool right onto the tensioner here. I have it kind of angled. Once I push this, take the tension off the belt. You can see the belt getting loosened up on the alternator. And we'll just go ahead and pull that off the alternator pulley. So as you can see, I have the belt pulled off the alternator. And I'll just leave my tool right on there. We'll exchange the alternator. And we'll put that belt right back on. Like I said, if you are changing the belt or the tensioner at this time, not a bad idea to do. The wire. We want to go ahead and remove all the wire connections to the alternators. There's one battery cable back here with a 13mm nut on this. I've already got it loose. And again, there is one connector right next to it. We'll go ahead and remove that. Once those connections are removed, there's two bolts holding the alternator. One is up here, and there's another one directly at the bottom. And these bolts are 15mm, top and bottom. Again, the nut back here, that's a 13mm. We'll go ahead and remove those. With both of these bolts loose, we can go ahead and pull those out. Again, that's the top. And the bottom here. Once those are loose, you want to take a pry bar, kind of insert it here, and see if you can kind of move the alternator. Looks like it is loose. It should be able to. I will need 2 hands for this. So we have the alternator completely removed from the vehicle. Now, one thing you might run into is a plug on the back of the alternator. Mine obviously looks like it's been boogered up before. Remember, remove it. There is a locking tab on it, that red piece. Mine's kind of broken off. Sometimes it's easier to unbolt the alternator and take your battery cable off of the back of the alternator, and then you can kind of flip it with the bottom up. It may be a little easier to remove the connector that way. But they're the same as any other connectors as far as, you know, they have the locking tab. Once you kind of pull those back, you're able to push the center and unlock them and push them off that way. Now that we have the alternators off, obviously you want to compare it with your new and make sure they're clocked correctly in the correct orientation, so it's going to mount up exactly how your original was. And looks like we're in good shape here, so we'll get this back in. The alternator is in place. Both bolts, top and bottom, are tight. I was able to make the connections in the back. And since I left the tool right on the tensioner, I was easily able to push that and get the belt up and over the alternator pulley. You do want to make sure the belt is in correct position as far as being where it should be on the pulleys. Probably not a bad idea to crawl underneath and make sure it's on all the pulley and seated where it should be. Now, so let's get everything else buttoned up. We'll get the airbox back in and the batteries put together. So we have everything buttoned up. Airbox is back on. Our batteries are back on. Looks like we're back in business. Our gauge is above 14 here. We can always put a voltmeter on the battery to make sure that's correct. But it sounds good. There's no noises. Seems to be good. It looks like we are back in business here. Obviously, you want to check the belt one more time, make sure everything's where it's supposed to be. And I did have a little bit of a knocking sound coming from the motor before. It seems like that has been cured. Now, spinning the old alternator by hand like this, you don't see any play or anything like that. But if I put this on the pulley end, you can see how the whole thing is. It's got a bit of a clackling sound going on inside. So that was definitely making a noise. Seems like a bearing in the back possibly, or internally. You can hear that. And that's where that noise was coming from. So I'm happy that's been solved. Hopefully this video will help somebody out. If you've got any questions, comments, please let me know. I thank you for watching.